You walk into a room and immediately feel it. The subtle shift in conversation when you approach, the way certain people seem to know exactly what buttons to push, the smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. You're not paranoid. You're not overthinking it. You're being manipulated, and they're banking on you not realizing it until it's too late. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something most people refuse to accept. The world is full of players who see every interaction as a chess match, every relationship as leverage, every conversation as an opportunity to extract something from you. They don't announce their intentions. They don't wear signs. They operate in shadows using charm, guilt, fear, and false intimacy to bend you to their will. But here's what they don't expect. Someone who knows their playbook. Someone who can see the manipulation coming from 3 moves away. Someone who refuses to be the pawn in their game. Machiavelli didn't write his strategies to create monsters. He wrote them to expose monsters, to arm the aware against the predatory, to give power back to those who refuse to be victims. Today, you're going to learn 7 tactical principles that will transform how you navigate every manipulative encounter for the rest of your life, not to become manipulative yourself, but to become immune to manipulation. Because once you understand how these psychological games work, once you can identify the patterns and techniques, you stop being an easy target. You become the person manipulators avoid, not because you're aggressive, but because you're unreadable. I've spent years studying these dynamics, watching how certain people seem to effortlessly control rooms while others get walked over without even knowing it happened. The difference isn't intelligence. It's not charisma. It's awareness. It's knowing what to look for and how to respond before the manipulation takes hold. But before we dive deep into the tactics, you need to understand something crucial about the manipulator's mindset. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a resource. Your time, your energy, your emotions, your connections, your money, your validation. All of it exists to serve their agenda. And they're incredibly skilled at making you believe that giving them what they want is actually your idea. This isn't about becoming cynical or suspicious of everyone. It's about developing the psychological radar that lets you distinguish between genuine human connection and calculated extraction. Because the people who truly care about you won't need to manipulate you to get what they want. They'll ask directly, respect your boundaries, and accept your decisions without retaliation. The manipulator operates differently. They create scenarios where saying no feels impossible. They manufacture urgency where none exists. They use your own values, your own kindness, your own desire to be helpful against you. And they're so smooth at it that you'll walk away from the interaction feeling drained, but unable to pinpoint exactly why. Machiavelli's first principle cuts straight to the heart of this dynamic. Never let them control the frame of the interaction. Every manipulation begins with frame control. They set the rules. They define the context. They establish what's normal and what's unreasonable. Once you accept their frame, you're already playing their game by their rules. Think about the last time someone made you feel guilty for setting a boundary. They didn't argue with your boundary directly. Instead, they reframed it. Your reasonable request became selfishness. Your healthy limit became cruelty. Your self-protection became betrayal. That's frame control in action. The moment you start defending your perfectly reasonable position, you've accepted their frame. You're now operating under the assumption that your boundary needs justification, that your time isn't valuable unless proven otherwise, that your comfort is less important than their wants. This is where most people lose the game before they even realize they're playing it. Machiavelli would tell you to never enter that arena. Don't defend what doesn't need defending. Don't explain what should be self-evident. Don't justify your right to exist on your own terms. When someone tries to guilt you into changing your mind, the response isn't an explanation. It's a redirect. They say you're being unreasonable. You don't argue about whether you're reasonable. You say, that's your perspective, and move on. They try to make you prove why you deserve respect. You don't provide proof. You simply act as if respect is already established. They attempt to negotiate your non-negotiables. You don't negotiate. You restate once and then disengage. This isn't rudeness. It's refusing to participate in a rigged game. Because every second you spend defending yourself is a second they're not spending respecting your position. And the longer the argument continues, the more they normalize the idea that your boundaries are up for debate. The second principle builds on the first. Observe their patterns before they observe yours. Manipulators are students of human behavior. They watch how you react to pressure. What triggers your guilt? What makes you uncomfortable? Where your weak spots are. They're collecting data every time you interact, building a psychological profile they can use later, but they're not expecting you to be doing the same thing to them. They assume you're operating on pure emotion while they're operating on strategy. This assumption becomes their vulnerability. Start watching how they handle rejection. Do they accept it gracefully, or do they immediately start pushing back? Notice how they respond when they don't get their way. Do they respect your decision, or do they become cold, passive-aggressive, or manipulative? Pay attention to how they talk about other people when those people aren't around. Do they respect others' boundaries, or do they mock people for having limits? These patterns will tell you everything you need to know about their character and their intentions. The person who consistently struggles to accept no as an answer is the person who will eventually try to manipulate you into saying yes. The person who talks badly about others for setting boundaries is the person who will punish you for doing the same. Machiavelli understood that information is power. But information only becomes power when you act on it. Once you've identified someone's manipulative patterns, you adjust your interaction style accordingly. You don't give them the emotional reactions they're fishing for. You don't provide the personal information they could use as leverage later. You keep the relationship surface level and transactional. This might sound cold, but it's actually protection. You're not being mean to them. You're simply refusing to give a manipulator the tools they need to manipulate you. It's the difference between being cruel and being careful. The third principle is perhaps the most challenging for good-hearted people to implement. Never reward manipulative behavior, even when it's easier to comply. This is where most people fail. They recognize the manipulation, they see it happening, but they give in anyway, because resistance feels more difficult than compliance. This is exactly what the manipulator is counting on. They're not trying to convince you that their request is reasonable. They're trying to make resistance so uncomfortable, so exhausting, so socially awkward that you choose the path of least resistance. They're betting that your desire for peace will override your need for boundaries. But every time you reward manipulation, you teach the manipulator that their tactics work on you. You become marked as someone who can be pushed, someone who will eventually cave under pressure, someone worth targeting in the future. The temporary peace you bought by giving in becomes the foundation for future manipulation. Machiavelli would tell you that short-term discomfort prevents long-term exploitation. The person who throws a tantrum when you say no needs to learn that tantrums don't work on you. The person who uses guilt to get their way needs to discover that guilt is ineffective. The person who threatens consequences needs to understand that you're not afraid of their consequences. This doesn't mean you become combative or aggressive. It means you become immovable. You state your position once, clearly and calmly. When they push back, you don't argue. You don't explain further. You don't justify or defend. You simply repeat your position if necessary, or better yet, you disengage entirely. The manipulator is used to people who debate, who can be worn down through persistence, who will eventually give in if the pressure continues long enough. They're not prepared for someone who simply refuses to engage with the manipulation at all. Your calm, consistent refusal to play their game disrupts their entire strategy. The fourth principle strikes at the manipulator's greatest weakness. Make them explain themselves while you remain mysteriously calm. Most people, when confronted with manipulation, either explode in anger or collapse into justification. Both reactions feed the manipulator's strategy. Your anger proves you're unstable. Your explanations prove you're insecure. But your calm curiosity, that's something they never prepared for. When someone makes an unreasonable demand, don't argue with the demand. Question the logic behind it. When they guilt trip you, don't defend against the guilt. Ask them to clarify their reasoning. When they create false urgency, don't panic about the timeline. Inquire about why this specific timing is so crucial. The manipulator thrives on your emotional reactions. They've crafted their approach specifically to trigger shame, fear, obligation, or desperation. But when you respond with genuine curiosity instead of emotion, you flip the entire dynamic. Now they're the ones who have to perform. They have to justify their position. They have to make their manipulation sound reasonable when spoken aloud. And here's what happens. Most manipulation doesn't survive scrutiny. It only works in the shadows of implied consequences and emotional pressure. The moment you drag it into the light of logical examination, it crumbles. The person demanding your immediate attention can't actually explain why it can't wait. The person making you feel guilty for your boundaries can't articulate why their comfort matters more than yours. The person threatening consequences can't justify why those consequences are appropriate or even real. This tactic is devastating because it uses the manipulator's own confidence against them. They walked into the interaction believing they were the smart one, the strategic one, the one in control. Your calm questions reveal that they haven't actually thought through their position beyond the emotional manipulation. They're exposed as someone who relies on pressure rather than reason. Machiavelli understood that the appearance of wisdom often crumbles under gentle examination. The person who seems so certain, so authoritative, so justified in their demands becomes visibly uncomfortable when asked to explain the foundation of that certainty. Your questions don't need to be aggressive or confrontational. Simple curiosity is enough. Help me understand why this needs to happen right now. I'm confused about why my decision affects you so strongly. Can you walk me through your thinking here? Watch their body language shift. Notice how they deflect back to emotion instead of addressing your question directly. Observe how they try to make you feel bad for asking instead of simply answering. These reactions confirm what you already suspected. There's no solid reasoning behind their demands. There's only manipulation masquerading as logic. The fifth principle requires you to master something most people never develop. Learn to weaponize your own indifference. This sounds harsh, but understand what we're really talking about. You're not becoming cruel or heartless. You're becoming selectively unavailable for manipulation. You're choosing where to invest your emotional energy instead of letting others choose for you. The manipulator's power comes from your need for their approval, your fear of their reaction, your desire to maintain peace, your guilt about disappointing them. But what happens when you genuinely stop caring about those things? What happens when their anger doesn't scare you? Their disapproval doesn't hurt you? Their guilt trips don't move you? They become powerless. Not because you've overpowered them, but because you've removed the fuel that feeds their manipulation. You can't guilt someone who isn't seeking your approval. You can't threaten someone who isn't afraid of your reaction. You can't manipulate someone who is genuinely indifferent to your emotional games. This indifference isn't something you fake or perform. It's something you cultivate through understanding your own worth independent of others' opinions. It's recognizing that someone else's inability to handle your boundaries is not your problem to solve. It's accepting that some people will be angry with you for protecting yourself and choosing to be okay with that anger. Machiavelli knew that the moment you stop needing something from someone, you gain all the power in the relationship. The person who cares less controls the interaction, not because they're mean, but because they're not operating from a place of desperation or need. When the manipulator realizes that their usual tactics have no effect on you, they face a choice. They can either adjust their behavior and treat you with respect, or they can escalate their manipulation. If they choose escalation, you've learned something valuable about their character. They're not someone who deserves access to your time, energy, or emotional investment. The sixth principle cuts to the core of why manipulation works in the first place. Never fill the silence they create with your anxiety. Manipulators are masters of uncomfortable silence. They make a demand, then wait. They express disappointment, then pause. They create tension, then let it hang in the air until you feel compelled to resolve it. This silence feels unbearable because it seems to demand a response. Your brain interprets the quiet as rejection, anger, or judgment. You feel pressured to fill the void with agreement, apologies, or explanations. And the moment you do, you've given them exactly what they wanted. Your discomfort with silence becomes their leverage. But what if you let the silence exist? What if you match their pause with your own calm? What if you refuse to be the one who breaks first? Suddenly, the silence becomes their problem, not yours. They created it to pressure you, but now they're sitting in it too. And unlike you, they actually need something from this interaction. They need your compliance, your agreement, your emotional reaction. The person who is comfortable with silence holds tremendous power. Because silence reveals truth. It strips away the performance and shows what people really want. The manipulator who uses quiet as a weapon becomes visibly uncomfortable when their silence is met with matching stillness. They start fidgeting, repeating themselves, or finally saying what they actually mean instead of dancing around it. Machiavelli understood that patience is a weapon. The person who can wait longer usually wins. Not through aggression, but through endurance. Your ability to remain calm and quiet while others squirm in discomfort demonstrates a level of self-control that unsettles those who rely on emotional manipulation. Practice this in low-stakes situations first. When someone makes an unreasonable request, don't immediately respond. Take a breath. Let there be a pause. Notice how they react to that space. Do they become more aggressive? Do they start justifying themselves without being asked? Do they try to fill the silence with more manipulation? Their reaction tells you everything about their true intentions. The seventh and final principle is the one that transforms you from someone who simply resists manipulation to someone who becomes completely immune to it. Always remember that their emergency is not your crisis. Manipulators are experts at manufacturing urgency. Everything is always immediate, critical, can't wait, needs to be decided right now. This artificial pressure is designed to bypass your rational thinking and force quick compliance. But genuine emergencies are rare. Most situations that feel urgent are only urgent in someone else's mind, usually because they failed to plan, procrastinated, or created unrealistic expectations. Their poor planning doesn't obligate you to sacrifice your boundaries, your time, or your well-being. When someone approaches you with urgent demands, your first response should be to slow down, not speed up. Ask yourself what happens if this waits until tomorrow. What are the actual consequences of not responding immediately? Most of the time, you'll discover that the urgency exists only in their imagination or their desire to control the situation. Machiavelli knew that time reveals truth. The person making urgent demands today will often forget about them entirely by next week. The crisis that seemed so important dissolves when met with calm patience, but your willingness to drop everything and accommodate their manufactured emergency becomes a pattern they'll exploit repeatedly. This doesn't mean you become unresponsive or unhelpful. It means you respond on your timeline, not theirs. It means you evaluate requests based on actual importance, not emotional pressure. It means you refuse to let someone else's anxiety become your responsibility. The manipulator counts on your good nature, your desire to help, your fear of seeming selfish. They know most people will sacrifice their own priorities to solve someone else's urgent problem. But when you consistently refuse to be rushed into decisions, when you take time to think regardless of their pressure, you eliminate their most powerful weapon. Watch what happens when you say, "Let me think about this and get back to you tomorrow." The person with legitimate needs will understand and wait patiently. The manipulator will immediately escalate, become emotional, or try to punish you for not complying instantly. Their reaction reveals their true character and confirms that your caution was justified. These 7 principles work because they address manipulation at its source. They don't just help you resist individual manipulative acts. They transform how manipulators perceive and interact with you. When someone realizes you can't be guilted, rushed, or emotionally controlled, they either adjust their behavior or avoid you entirely. Both outcomes protect you. The person who masters these principles doesn't become cold or heartless. They become selectively warm. Their kindness becomes intentional rather than automatic. Their help becomes valuable rather than expected. Their time becomes precious rather than assumed. They create space for genuine relationships by eliminating the false ones. Machiavelli understood that in a world full of players, you must know the game, not to become a player yourself, but to stop being played. These tactics don't make you manipulative. They make you immune to manipulation. They give you back the power to choose who deserves access to your energy, your time, and your emotional investment. The manipulator thrives in shadows, using implied consequences and emotional pressure to control your decisions. But when you shine the light of awareness on their tactics, when you respond with calm strategy instead of emotional reaction, their power evaporates. You become someone they can't read, can't predict, and ultimately can't control. From this moment forward, you're no longer an easy target. You're someone who recognizes the game, understands the rules, and refuses to play by anyone else's terms but your own. The manipulators of the world will sense this change in you immediately, and they'll move on to easier prey, leaving you free to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than psychological exploitation. That's the ultimate victory. Not defeating the manipulator, but becoming someone they don't even attempt to manipulate in the first place.